Wonderful. There's usually a lot more of them, but a few of them aren't feeling well, and you guys just really did great. Thank you. So good morning.
Good morning.
And happy Halloween. You know, Halloween's not one of my favorite holidays. I recently figured out why. It's because if I'm going to dress up in costume, I have to look really good. I think that's one of my shadow sides I need to look at. I've been told that it's Reverend Cherie's favorite holiday, and I would venture a bet that if she were here this morning, she'd be in costume. And Halloween is a time when we think of ghosts and goblins and things lurking in the shadows, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about the shadow this morning. So is anyone out there old enough to remember that really old radio show called The Shadow Knows? I see a few hands. I remember as a child when I got sick. Now, I lived in one of those households where if you got sick, you were not allowed to get up and go into the living room and watch television. No, you had to stay in bed. However, the special treat is that my mom would bring the radio in, and I got to listen to all these programs on the radio like The Lone Ranger, and one of my favorites was The Shadow Knows. And I recently discovered you can find them on YouTube. Isn't that cool? You can go back and listen to them all on YouTube. Now, I'm not going to be talking about the radio show. And I'm not going to be talking about that black thing that follows us when we're out in the sun and we're walking around. But I am going to talk about the shadow. What I've discovered in my many years in ministry and counseling and even in my own inner work is that a lot of us have a deep down message inside of us that says, I'm not okay. I'm not good enough. And even if we've done work on ourselves, which many of us have, and you get to that place where you say, you know, I love myself just the way I am, we still have those places when that hidden stuff within us that we don't like just sort of creeps up. And we all have a shadow side to us. And Carl Jung was the first person who gave us that term shadow, to refer to those parts of our personality that we've rejected out of fear, ignorance, shame, lack of love. And his basic notion was the shadow was that person you'd rather not be. Now, I remember one of the times when I connected with my own inner shadow. I was at a Unity convention, and one of the things I really like about going to Unity convention was I got to connect with my classmates. And so I was having lunch with one of my classmates. The shadow doesn't like me talking about it. So I was having lunch with one of my classmates, Eileen, and we were talking about another classmate named Pat. And Pat was somebody that got on my nerves all the time. You know, she was one of those people that when I saw her, I sort of tried to avoid her. And because I was reading this book, I'm talking about The Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. There's some copies in the bookstore. And I'd been reading this book, and so I was in touch with what it was about Pat that bothered me. And I was sharing that with my friend at lunch. You see, Pat was one of those women that just said whatever she wanted to, whenever she wanted to. To me, she seemed sort of brazen and loud, candid, you know, sometimes even rude. And what I realized is, you know, there's a Pat inside of me. There's a part of me that is wanting to be loud and say what's on my mind, but I can't do that because I'm afraid you won't like me. And so I had this Pat part inside of me that I wasn't allowing to be present. I'm kind of introverted and somewhat quiet, but inside of me there's an extroverted loudmouth that I hadn't allowed to be present, and I kept projecting it onto Pat. So I had this realization with Eileen at lunch, and I was sharing this realization with her. And later on, I was in the bookstore. One of the things about Unity conventions is they always have really great Unity bookstores. So I was in the bookstore and Pat walks in. Now, Spirit is really great. She really is. And Pat walked up to me and said, I've sort of noticed that there's this wall between us, and I was wondering what that was about. Well, because I had just had this insight, I was able to share it with her, that there was a part of her that reminded me of a part of me that I had not allowed to be present. And it was really a very, very healing moment. So getting in touch with our shadow is very important work. And too often we have the mistaken belief that in order to be spiritual, we have to be perfect. And I'm here to tell you that isn't true. In order to be spiritual or divine, we have to be whole. And to be whole means we have to be everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. And it's all our perception anyway. We can't fully know the light unless we're willing to embrace the darkness. And I recently heard somebody say it's only in the darkness that we see the stars. So we need that darkness. And the truth is there's a gift for us in the shadow. Everything that we think is unattractive and needs to be hidden actually has a purpose and a gift. Can you think of a time when it would be appropriate to say exactly what's on your mind? Like maybe you just hired somebody and they're not living up to what you hired them for. You need to be able to speak to them and tell them what's on your mind. You don't have to be rude about it, but you need to be able to do that. And that was difficult for me, and I had hidden that part of me away that could speak freely, that part of me that Pat represented. Now, I've gotten better at that, but I'm still evolving. I'm not always perfect. Everything that pushes your buttons, all those loud, rude, stupid, arrogant, bigoted people, they're really inside of you. Deepak Chopra says, we all carry the imprint of the entire universe within us. We are not in the world, but the world is in us. Each of us possesses every existing human quality. There's nothing we can see or conceive that we are not, and the purpose of our journey is to restore ourselves to wholeness. The universe is like a hologram. A hologram is a three-dimensional image that's derived from two-dimensional film. And the thing that's really great about a hologram is that the entire three-dimensional picture can be contained in one little tiny section of that film, which is why it's called a hologram. And in a similar way, every aspect of the universe is contained within each of us. Every strand of my DNA carries the entire evolutionary history of life. Your mind contains the potential of every thought that will ever be expressed or ever has been. And when you understand that, you contain everything you see in others, your entire world sort of shifts and changes. Because if that's true, you must be capable of being the greatest person you've ever imagined. And also capable of being the worst person that you've ever imagined. And our journey is about making peace with all of that. It's not about picking out the good qualities and trying to ignore or hide the bad qualities. We must be able to be with them all. What we can't be with won't let us be. I'm going to say that again. What we can't be with won't let us be. And the author gives a great illustration. In the book, she talks about the analogy of a castle to illustrate that world within us. And it reminded me of Jesus' quote when he said, "My Father's mansion is like a castle with many rooms." And she says, imagine that there's this magnificent castle inside of you with long hallways and thousands of rooms. And every room in the castle is perfect and possesses a special gift. Each room represents a different aspect of yourself. It's an integral part of the entire perfect castle. Every child has explored every inch of that castle without shame or judgment. When we were children, we just explored who we were, every aspect of ourselves. We searched for its jewels. We embraced every room, whether it was a bedroom, a bathroom, a cellar, an attic. It didn't matter what it was. We were excited. Full of light and wonder that castle was. And then all of a sudden, somebody came into our castle and pointed out a room that they didn't think belonged. And you wanted to be liked and you wanted to be accepted, and so you kind of closed off the door of that room. They said if you wanted your castle to be perfect, you had to do that, and so you did that. And more and more people would come into your castle and they would point out rooms that didn't quite fit, they didn't think. And slowly you shut one door after another. And they were all closed until they were all put in the dark. And from that time on, you closed more and more doors for all kinds of reasons. You know, you closed doors because you were afraid, or you thought they were too bold, or maybe they were too conservative or too liberal. You closed doors because other castles didn't have rooms like you had, because religious leaders told you you needed to avoid those rooms. You closed any door that didn't fit society's rules, or maybe the own image that you had perceived. And she says, many people have locked away so many rooms that we forgot we were a castle. We began to think we were a two-bedroom house in need of repairs. So all the rooms in your castle have a purpose, and they all make up the whole. There's a room called love, another room called anger, and there's a time when anger is appropriate. There's a room called generosity, a room called greed. You know, and if I've closed off the room called greed, what happens is that I will project it out there onto others, and then I'll start judging you if I'm perceiving greed in you. And you know, in Unity we teach that God is all there is, and that we are all one. And if you've been coming here for any time, you know that. And that one that we say we are is the Christ. And the Christ is different than Jesus. Jesus was the one that modeled knowing his full Christness. He lived that out. But in Unity we teach Christ is not the great exception. Jesus was the great example. And so that Christ within us is that part of us that we see as whole, holy, precious, divine. It's our wholeness. It's the truth about who we are. It's our true identity. And so when I look out at somebody else, what I see is a mirror. And what I'm going to see in that mirror is either the Christ, or I'm going to see something that I'm projecting out onto them. If I'm conscious of that Christ of who I am, that's who I'm going to see when I look out there. And since I'm evolving, sometimes I see the Christ when I look out there, and sometimes I don't. And there are only two things I can see. You know, when I look out and look at Roderick, I can see someone who's passionate and talented and sings wonderfully. And I might look at myself and go, well, I'm not that. But the truth is, I have that inside of me too. I can see the Christ in him if I'm owning it in me. Now, the shadow is simply, again, something that's projected, and it covers up or masks that Christ presence. And my shadow is anything I've not allowed to be present in myself, anything I've not claimed as my own. And you know what? Sometimes it's something positive. Sometimes I look in that mirror and I say, you know, they've got something I don't. They're better than me. But the truth is I've just covered up that within myself. The only thing that's really present is the Christ. So when we look at someone else and say, isn't it great that they have those qualities, and we stick them up on a pedestal, we're not owning those qualities within ourselves. We all have a light shadow as well as a dark shadow, a place where we buried our power, our authenticity, our brilliance, our magnificence. So anytime you're looking out there and either coveting a quality that someone is expressing or judging them and being critical of something that they're doing, you're expressing, you're projecting something out onto them that you're not owning in yourself. And the universe is a wonderful place because it will bring you lots of opportunities to guide you back to the totality of who you are. We attract whomever and whatever we need to mirror those aspects of ourselves. Now, the author of this book gives a great story, an example. She said she talked about when she went to Colorado to give a seminar, and she was staying with this couple, Mike and Marilyn, and they had picked her up at the airport, and they were driving home with the kids in the car, and they were talking about what she was going to be talking about, and they kind of understood what she was saying, but Mike said, you know, I understand and agree with what you're saying, but there's a few things I'm not. And she said, really? What aren't you? And he said, I'm not an idiot. And she looked at him and said, well, if you're everything, you're also an idiot. And she said there was dead silence in the car. His wife and his kids are looking at her. She had just called Mike an idiot. Well, Mike started to tell her about all the idiots he knew and how he wasn't like any of them. And she said he was so emotional about the people he was describing that she knew it was a charged issue for him. And that's an issue right there, a sign. If you've got something that you're really charged about, you need to pay attention. So when he finished talking about all the idiots that he knew and how he wasn't like any of them, she said, well, have you ever done anything that an idiot might do? And he thought about it and said, well, yeah, but you can't compare what I've done to those other idiots. They're really big idiots. And she says, you know, the psyche doesn't know the difference between big and small. An idiot is an idiot. So she asked him to consider that idiocy was an aspect of him that he had rejected at some point in his life. And now he was getting an opportunity to look at that. And she looked at his wife and his kids and asked if they had any problem with her calling them an idiot. And they didn't have any charge on the word whatsoever. Well, they were in the car, and it was like below 18 degrees outside. It was freezing, and they were all bundled up. So they get to the house, and they all get out, and they go to the door, and he's looking around for the key, and he can't find the key to the house. And he goes to the car, and he looks, and finally he comes back, and he says, I think I must have locked the keys inside the house. And she said, what kind of person locks the keys inside the house at minus 18 degrees below zero? And everybody shouted, an idiot. Well, later on, Mike got in touch with when he was a child, and he remembered doing something stupid, and he got teased for it, and he made a decision right then, never again was he going to do that. And he closed out one of the rooms in his castle because he thought it was bad. So if you're disowning a part of yourself, life will bring you lots of people, lots of opportunities where you get to see that aspect of yourself. And if you can't find that quality or the possibility of that quality inside, the universe is going to keep bringing other people that you projected onto. So there are parts of me that I might not want to look at, and I don't want anybody else to look at. And I'm going to project them onto a mirror called you. And then when I see you acting out in the very way that I have kept hidden, kept in the shadow, then my buttons get pushed. But you know what? They were my buttons. And that's actually the whole purpose of relationships anyway, is to heal our stuff. You know, I can run away from you, I can run away from the situation, but if I don't heal that stuff that keeps coming up, I'm going to just keep attracting it more and more into my life. And you know, we're tempted to look for safe relationships. And I'm not saying you have to attract somebody that's abusive to you, but I am saying that you can't hide from that shadow stuff in you that needs to be healed. And so we draw into our lives people that mirror that to us so that we get a chance to look at it and say, okay, This is where that came from, and I'm going to be whole. I'm going to embrace it. And thank God for those people that give us an opportunity to look at our stuff so we can choose to heal. The only way I'm going to get to a place where I see the Christ out there is to be willing to shine that light on me and make it whole so that I see the reflection of you as the Christ. And you know, the shadow is kind of what gives life dimension. You know, without it, you need both light and dark. During the pandemic, I discovered I was an artist. And what I've learned in painting is that you have to have both the shadow and the light. You have to have the dark and the light in order for there to be dimension in a shadow, in a painting. And one time I was watching a class on TV, and they were teaching you how to draw without drawing a single line. They had a statue with a light shining on it, and all they had you do was shade in the shadow. And as you shaded in the shadow, the image of the statue appeared. It was so cool. And it's true that the shadow can't exist without the light. And our goal is to look in the mirror and see the Christ. And so I'm going to challenge you this week to observe your judgments about other people. When you find yourself getting triggered and being judgmental about somebody else, look and see if there's some quality that they have that might be a hint of a quality in you. And just ask yourself, why is that quality so upsetting to me? And then just look within and see where you can bring out some awareness to it. And remember that Christ is the only real reflection. We are spirit, learning how to be human, and the people out there that we judge are also spirit, learning how to be human. So we have to remember that we're all one. So the shadow knows. It knows exactly what we need to bring to the light in order to heal and integrate and open up the rooms of our castle. Awareness is the first step. And don't forget to love yourself in the process. God bless you.